My name is Elizabeth Hampton. I'm a physical therapist here at Core Physio in Bellingham. We're celebrating our 16th year, and I've been a PT for 33 years, specializing in orthopedic, sports, spine, and pelvic health. There we go.
Excellent. Go ahead and get started.
Okay. So, interesting topic today about terminology that we've become familiar with in kind of the fitness and rehab lexicon is the concept of core strength, and the question of how perfect do bodies need to be to move well, feel strong, and to be comfortable. And so the question that I'm presenting today is really about how we read signals from our body and how things like MRIs, for example, or other diagnostic tests, if we get an MRI result back because our hip hurts, for example, and we have a diagnostic test and it shows arthritis, how should that land? Like, how can we take some of those bits of information and inform how we feel about our bodies and how we react to when our bodies feel uncomfortable or sensitive with a certain movement? I want you to know that none of this is my opinion. All of this is based on best evidence and current research, and I'm happy to share some of those resources with the YMCA so they could share that if you're a nerd like me and you're curious. So first, let's talk about core strength. And hopefully I've got my window open and hopefully that background noise isn't distracting. So when we think about core strength, right now, go ahead and contract your core, whatever that means to you. And my question for you is, how does that feel? Do you feel like you're shorter and compressed? Or do you feel like you're tall and light, very Audrey Hepburn or power suit kind of feeling? So I'm going to demonstrate a few different kinds of core contractions, and let's talk a little bit about that. Because it's not unusual for people to say, well, my back hurts, but you know, my core should be stronger. So when we think about contractions, you can think about, okay, there's a core contraction like this. I'm going to contract my core. And do you notice how I feel much more compressed from the side? I might look like I am compressed in that way. We don't want this kind of core contraction because usually bodies don't like that kind of compression. They want something that creates length and strength. So this compressive kind of contraction, unless someone's going to slug you in the belly, and I hope that never happens anyway, it's not the best way to contract your core. So here's another option. Some people will just suck in their stomach and they'll lift the rib cage from the front, sucking in the stomach, lifting the rib cage, lifting the shoulders. Is that contracting your core? Yeah, but it's also kind of sucking it in. It's kind of like this. Like it sucks it in with this negative pressure, which plays a different role. But it's not the strategy for motor control around the torso. There's also a rib cage kind of flare that can happen if you're trying to contract your core. So really what we're looking for when you're contracting your core is, this is my belly relaxed, and now I'm thinking about just very gently, three-dimensionally, just drawing my rib cage kind of up and in. It's really one of the best cues that works, at least for me, and cues are very personal, is feeling like I'm Audrey Hepburn, tall and elegant, with a lightness, that when you think of a core contraction, it should feel really natural, and it shouldn't be a submaximal kind of contraction. So the next thing, if you watch the videos that I put in the link about Peter O'Sullivan, he and many researchers from Australia and around the world have changed the way we look at core control, because ideally you want movement to be light and natural, You don't want to think about, we've trained throughout the world this thought that if you don't ask your core to contract beforehand, it goes rogue and it's just off. And neurologically, we're not always finding that to be true. One of the best things you could possibly be doing at any time, but especially during this pandemic, is moving with the amazing folks at the Y, because they make it fun. They capture habitual kind of movement. And we don't want people to think that they need to like contract their core before they move. And if they don't do that, they could be unstable, because that's simply not correct. Now, we know that how we organize movement makes a difference. But one thing that I'd love to share with you today is for you to know that you don't have to think and invite a muscle before you move with every movement every day of your life. Our goal is to, certainly we get these muscles online and we think about how to recruit them with all the fabulous cues that you get when you're in your movement classes. And when you flip that switch over and over again with some big global movements, those muscles get smarter. And you don't have to think about a core contraction or a kind of core contraction before you move. I want you to think about that Audrey Hepburn elegant pre-activation before you move. And then sooner or later, your movement should feel like it's just more organized and those autopilot muscles are coming in. What we find clinically as physical therapists is that there are people who are pre-activating in a compressive way, or it changes their breathing, and their intent is good to provide that support, but the results aren't quite what they're looking for. So one of the things that I just presented was talking about the data about core contractions, that they're autopilot muscles, and certainly we want to train them. The second thing is that how we contract them should feel natural and elegant. It shouldn't feel like you're taller in the front and shorter in the back, or taller in the back and shorter in the front. It should feel like it is three-dimensional all the way around, and that you're just tall and elegant. Interestingly, if you stand on one leg, hold on for balance if you're trying this now, and you're reaching that leg into the ground and you're reaching the crown of your head up, what's interesting is when you do that reach, you can feel the whole symphony of muscles coming in from a postural perspective all over your body in a really elegant, fabulous kind of way that doesn't feel compressive. So that last bit when it comes to core control is talking about that reframing. I'd encourage you to play with how you recruit the muscles around your torso so that you feel tall, elegant, light, and not compressed. And also, I want to make sure you have normal breathing. And the best way to know if you're breathing normally is just to be able to count out loud. Tammy, I don't know if during the classes, do you have people count repetitions out loud? If you do, it's not a bad idea. I see your head popping around.
Yeah, I am kind of bad about that, but some of the instructors are much better about that. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because you can't hold your breath and count at the same time. Otherwise, you sound like the Godfather, like 1, 2, 3. You know, you should, if you can count 1 and 2 and 3, then you can get the muscular support you're looking for without closing your glottis at the top. So you want to make sure your breathing is normal. Because if you have to hold your breath to have a feeling of muscle control or strength, then you're training something that's probably not a great idea, because holding your breath and bearing down while you're exercising is not a great idea. So we want you to be able to use that strength that in a functional way with normal breathing. So that is, I wasn't sure if today was going to be question and answer. So I don't know if any of y'all have any questions that you think would be helpful to answer when we're talking about core training before we start talking about MRIs and stuff.
Well, maybe if they have questions, they could pop them in the chat box and we can watch that. What do you think?
Oh, I am completely game.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you guys have questions, put them in the chat box, and that way Elizabeth can answer them. If we
Yeah.
don't see any questions, she's going to just motor
I'm just
on.
gonna keep going. Hold on
Yeah.
tight.
Yeah,
And we have until 9:45, if I recall correctly.
that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
And the links that Elizabeth was referring to, we will try to put them with the YouTube posting of this, which is just on Whatcom Family YMCA.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some really nice links. So we'll watch the chat box if there's any. I know everyone is at home, you know, like I don't know if you'd be watching this with your partner or something and saying, how does it look? Do I look shorter? You know, so observe each other and get that feedback. All right, I'm going to go on to talk about MRIs and other kind of diagnostic tests, whether it's an X-ray or an MRI. These are powerful tools, and they're really important because when bodies hurt or don't feel right, you go to your trusted care provider to get some tests and understand what's going on. And the most important thing I want to share is that diagnostic tests like X-ray and MRI and CT scans and all those things, those can pick up some really important things. And so there is value in that testing, and we know that to be true. What is interesting is the trend in testing over the past 5, 10, 15 years compared to maybe 20 or 30 years ago. That what they found is that there's a lot of folks who might have a musculoskeletal or an orthopedic discomfort. And if the first step is an MRI, they found that starting with an MRI rather than starting with rehab, and I'm just looking at my phone because I've got some good data here, that starting with an MRI rather than starting with PT can cost almost $5,000 more than getting PT first. Now, I'm a physical therapist, and this might sound like just complete marketing for physical therapy, when in fact the study was independent of physical therapists, and this has been repeated a number of times. And this is actually a really important point. A lot of your primary care providers will not automatically start with an MRI or an X-ray because there are signs and symptoms that people present with that are red flags, so to speak, where you think, okay, I want to make sure I understand the bone integrity and some of the structural integrity. For example, if I have osteopenia and I slipped on a grape in Safeway and I fell on my bum and my back hurts, I'm going to get an MRI and probably an X-ray as well, just to make sure I don't have a compression fracture. So again, it's very important that we see the value in this diagnostic testing. That's important. And the other thing that's important is talking about how there are changes that can be observed on MRI or X-ray that are considered normal changes. So it's not unusual for us to have clients who come in and say, you know what, my hip hurts. And I wanted to have an MRI, and I had an MRI, and my doctor said everything looks fine. And it was really frustrating because I don't feel fine, and I was sure apparently nothing's wrong. So let's unpack that a little bit. When it comes to MRIs, and pardon me looking away, I'm actually looking at a reference that I'll share with Tammy, that if you look at disc degeneration, for example, disc degeneration is found in 37% of 20-year-olds, 80% of 50-year-olds, and 96% of 80-year-olds. So if that is one of those common findings, some people will call it like wrinkles on the inside, meaning they're signs of aging, but they're not necessarily a dangerous sign of aging, in that there are repeated studies that show people with disc degeneration who have no discomfort whatsoever. There are people with disc degeneration on an MRI who that's not the pain causer quite commonly within those populations. So one of the big movements in medical care is to make sure that if an individual is getting their MRI results, that they have it read with a provider there with you, so that you don't start reading all these Latin terms and start thinking, oh no, I am really in trouble here, that they can actually translate and let you know these changes are common even in 20-year-olds, and it does not necessarily predict why your back is uncomfortable. And that's what physical therapy is for. We want to rule out those red flags, and there's a lot of improvement that can be had. Again, not my opinion, but based on repeated data over and over again. So let's talk about disc bulges and how common those are. 30% of 20-year-olds have disc bulges, 60% of 50-year-olds, and 84% of 80-year-olds have disc bulges, the majority of which are asymptomatic. Now, when you start getting into more significant, longer lists of structural changes that have a higher level of severity, statistically, those tend to correlate with structurally caused symptoms, but still we can improve. So for example, if I may use my own example, I have multi-level cervical stenosis throughout my cervical spine. I had 2 disc herniations, and I've got multiple disc bulges. I'm 55, and if I ride my road bike on the drops and I'm in this kind of position, my neck doesn't like hanging out there for a long time. But otherwise, I'm pretty asymptomatic. Again, I'm just one human being, but you can see how that fits into some of the MRI findings. I might have a number of MRI findings, but I also know how to care for my body, listen to it carefully, and my symptoms really are not a problem. But I have changed the way I do things. So in our last few minutes, unless Tammy, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. But if you think of any questions, because you know your people, if you think of any questions, you just jump in. Does this ever come up in classes?
Well, I think your point is well taken, because I think that, like, I've had imaging done on my knees before, and they come back with like a million things, but really, if you know how to take care of what you have, a lot of times it can either really tamp down those symptoms, or like you said, you're asymptomatic as long as you take care of yourself. So yeah.
So what I would welcome, there is so much new educational resources just about pain, because everybody's going to feel it during their lifetime, and understanding a little bit more about that, about pain, what it is and how to respond to it, is probably one of the biggest shifts in how we manage pain. And this is an educational shift that's happening across the world. So we'll talk about that. Just got a great question from Bonnie. Thank you very much. To take my personal example, she asks, what changes have I made to keep the issues from becoming a problem? So my example was cervical stenosis in my neck, and the history of a couple disc herniations. So disc herniations tend to be sensitive to flexion, and flexion is this movement. And stenosis tends to be sensitive to extension, which is this movement, and sometimes with rotation. So when it comes to my discs in my neck, I used to fold towels this way. I used to go like this, and I fold them this way. Beautiful. I'm so glad that's recorded on Zoom. That's fabulous. I'll never do it again. But that cervical flexion would cause aching into my shoulder blades. So I changed the way, I mean, it's a silly example, but I changed the way I folded my towels because that was bothering me every day. When it comes to yoga, there are some positions that I don't do. And I'm blanking on the one when you're on your back and your neck can go into flexion. My neck just doesn't like that. It's not painful when I do that immediately, but I'm really thoughtful about any kind of loaded flexion during yoga and different kinds of daily movements. I can flex my neck. It just doesn't like to stay there. When it comes to the back of my neck and my stenosis, I don't even actually think about it, but all I know is that if I'm riding my bike, and I love riding my bike, and if I used to be on bars, that I would be here and my neck would be here, I can't tolerate this. Probably within 15 or 20 minutes, my hands will go numb and I'll start feeling aching into my shoulder blades. So one of the things I did was I changed my bike setup, and I love my bike. So I don't go down here anymore. I ride at the top, and I also got a shorter stem, so I can ride this way instead of this way. My neck doesn't like this. It really likes this. So those are a couple examples of some modifications that I've made. But even if I wasn't a physical therapist, and if you guys aren't physical therapists, what can you do when you're looking at a movement and you're wondering if that's a pain that, or a discomfort that feels like you're stretching something tight, or if it's a discomfort that's saying you should be careful with this? And with our last few minutes, I'm going to give you some parameters. First of all, working with a physical therapist, and we have so many really amazing people here in the community. If you have a relationship with somebody, go see them and help understand what movements are safe for you, considering all of your body's preferences. When it comes to movement, this is what I tell my clients. I want a movement that feels meaningful, relevant, helpful, challenging. It might feel kind of spicy. You might think, oh, wait a second, let me figure this out. I can feel my muscle working, but I don't feel like anything is pinching, snagging, stabbing, start asking yourself to kind of describe what it feels like, because all of you are so active with the work that you do with the Y that you know when something feels like, hey, this feels like it's a good challenge for me. It feels like my muscles are working hard. It's challenging, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable and I'm not aching afterwards. I'm just tired afterwards. So the first step would be really listening to what your body is telling you. And if you're not sure, then I know, Tammy, you guys are amazing at showing lots of modifications. For example, if it's a standing movement and you can hold on for balance, holding on for balance is not cheating. So hold on, center yourself. You can always lighten up your grip, but listen to how your body feels with that particular movement. If you feel something that's uncomfortable in your body, be curious about it. Think, well, that's feeling kind of sensitive today. That's unusual. Is it because I did a bunch of gardening yesterday? Or just kind of unpack the activities you've done in the last few days or a week that maybe you always do gardening, but yesterday was so beautiful and there was too much morning glory and you thought, man, I am not stopping until I get rid of that morning glory, and you were in the garden for 6 hours. Think about why other factors that might be causing your body to be uncomfortable. One of the things that I will be sharing is an incredible course, and it's called What's Pain Got to Do with It? And it's written by one of my colleagues, Katie Shaner, here at Core Physio, and it is a free online class. We will start charging for it in the fall, but right now it is completely free, and I will send that link to Tammy. Because I think that could be an incredible resource on just how to listen to sensitivity in your body when your body's telling you something, on when it's a red flag, when you need to reduce the dose of your challenge, or when you might need to move it a little bit of a different way. But the bottom line is that, what is the bottom line? I'm so glad this is being recorded. The bottom line is how you organize movement matters. And Tammy, when you're leading a class, you can watch everyone and you can walk over and give some customized guidance when you're seeing folks. How has it been working during the Zoom classes on giving people feedback about their movement, and what recommendations have you made?
Well, we have a whole team during class. So we typically, for most of our classes, we have 2 instructors. So you brought up balance. Today, Mary will be teaching. And chances are she will be the one that does the challenging version, and I will be the stable one. But we also, it's a little bit harder to offer personal modifications, but we do have someone moderating, Elena, that let you in today, who watches everybody, and if something comes up that maybe we can't see while we're teaching, she might throw it out to us either as a recommendation to the whole group, like, hey, here's something we saw, and heads up, or something that we can contact somebody with. And also just watching, like if anything were to happen, like if somebody, we have somebody watching for that.
Smart.
Yeah. But I have a quick example about what you were talking about. I had this terrible toothache, and I've never been like a tooth grinder because I just don't carry stress that way. But my dentist said that you appear to be clenching your teeth. And I've been taking this interval class from a gal that used to teach here, but now she teaches in New York. So I've been taking her class, and she does burpees. Well, I hate burpees. I hate them so much. But I'm trying to teach myself to like them, so I've been doing them. And I started paying attention to my burpees, and sure enough, every time I like go down, I go, oh, like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm glad I'm not in class with other people that can see me, because now I let my mouth hang open during my burpees so I don't ruin my molar. Anyway, that's kind of what you were talking about. Like, I had to figure out where that was coming from.
Exactly. Nice observation. Oh my gosh. And it really is about being curious and listening to your body. And how you move does matter. I would imagine that many of you have found that when you just organize a movement differently, just by making sure your knee tracks over the center of your foot, or for some people when they're standing, thinking about their pubic bone and their sternum, some people will stand with their pubic bone in front of their sternum, and that might make their back kind of achy. Getting your sternum over your pubic bone when you're doing standing movements could make a difference. Those are just a couple examples, but those little tiny changes might make a movement feel yummier. Very technical term, but truly look for movements that feel relevant, meaningful, yummy, challenging, helpful, relevant, spicy maybe, but none of them should feel like it increases any symptoms or pain afterwards. So I hope some of this narrative has been helpful, and thank you so much for inviting me today.
Yay, it looks like, yeah, we have a good thank you from Susan. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. It is always a pleasure to be the recipient of your vast knowledge.
Oh.
Also, your word choices were excellent.
Oh, thank you. It's always fun. You guys do amazing work. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. You too.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.